End of the video, I want to look ahead to 2021 because hopefully, first of all, it will be a brighter year overall, and second of all, I'd be interested in people's thoughts and opinions on my thoughts and opinions about what I might do in 2021 in terms of gaming. First off, in case there are some of you here who did not watch my pandemic gaming video, which is kind of the companion to this one, that is one where I talked about games that I played this year that I did not film and my thoughts about them and why I bought them and where I was going with them. I tried this year to play a little outside of my typical go-to of the fantasy dungeon crawl sort of game because I wanted to expand my gaming repertoire, and being home so much, I had more time to do gaming than typically I would. Those games included Everdell, which was purchased as a worker placement game and also something I could play with kids, even though it's not really a kid's game, but I was interested in a light-ish worker placement game. And Terraforming Mars, which has been a hit with me, and another worker placement, dice placement game, the Artemis Project, that kind of fell flat with me. I couldn't really engage with it, even though I like the art direction quite a bit and the components are great. I have to try again with that one. It just wasn't really too much of a hit. And Thunderstone Quest, which was enjoyable. I spent a lot of money on that one to make the draw deck unique, and that one of my kids really likes it, so we take it out, and it's been a success in that regard for me, but as just for solo play, I think it was just ultimately a little too light, too big a footprint. So with those comments in mind, and you could watch the video if you haven't and want more in-depth thoughts on that, I'm looking ahead to a couple things for this year and would welcome your thoughts. One is I want to get into heavier worker placement games, but I'm not with those type of mechanics, and with most of these types of mechanics that we're talking about, I really feel strongly that I want something sci-fi, because I don't know why it's easier for me to overcome what I find as the blandness or the just lack of engagement that I typically feel in these types of mechanics when I'm thinking about sci-fi. So I've been thinking about getting a heavier sci-fi kind of game that I don't typically play, and a few things that are bubbling through my mind right now are High Frontier, which I have thought about off and on. When I heard of the new edition years ago, I got really excited about it, and then I thought, realistically, I'm never going to play this thing, but this has kind of come back into my consciousness. I'm not really sure. I suspect I would purchase it and, quite frankly, not ever get through it. It seems to me like something I would need maybe a gaming partner to help me commit to that. But that's one thing I'm thinking about. The other thing I'm really thinking about is PAX Transhumanity. I have not played any of this series of games, and this one is enticing because, frankly, the small box. I have limited storage capacity, but the theme and the concepts behind it also seem to be something maybe that I would enjoy. I have printed out the living rules, and it's just impossible in looking through those to get any kind of sense of it. I've never played a Eklund game at all, and the other themes of it seem interesting in an abstract kind of way, but for me, actually, gameplay-wise, to commit time and thought, I really want something that is in the fantasy world, in the sense of like not real, in the sci-fi world in the sense of theme, but conceptually in the fantasy world. So I'm not interested in thinking about evolution or any of the other things that are in the other games. That feels too much like work to me, and an actual simulation, whereas a simulation of a pretend thing is something more that I could get around. So on the heavier side of things, I'm thinking of these. I would really welcome suggestions from people who have knowledge more so than I do of worker placement games or Euros. I think these kind of fall into, at least in my mind, these categories. Anything that has like cubes and things is really what I'm talking about. Another aside is I've long wanted to play a train game, but I know these are inherently not solo. There's one that is, I think, mainline. Mainline 1820, I can't remember, has had a solo mode built in, but I've never been able to find that game at a price I'm willing to pay. So that's another question slash thought I have put out there for people who are viewing. And then on the lighter side of things, I'm thinking about my Arkham Horror. I'm thinking about selling or even giving away my Arkham Horror collection because I've gotten enjoyment out of it. It's just too big a footprint. It's too fiddly with the sliders. I find myself not really playing it, and I enjoyed it, with one of my kids years ago, and the other one's not that interested. And just as a solo thing, at this point, it seems it's too much of a heavy lift for too light a game ultimately for me to be getting it out very much. And I so I'm thinking about getting rid of that, but at the same time, I've never played Eldritch Horror, and I initially dithered in terms of which one I was going to buy, and I went with Arkham Horror for a variety of reasons. And so now I'm thinking, like, well, should I get Eldritch Horror? Is that worth at this point purchasing for me? And I like the theme. I don't know if it's different enough. I don't really know that I need it. I don't need any of these things, but I don't know that I want to spend my gaming space and money on that. But it is an absence in my repertoire in terms of what I've played that I sort of feel like it's something I should have played at this point. I do have Elder Sign. I don't know if that fits in the same. It kind of fits in the same space, obviously different mechanics. So that's another thing I'd be interested in people's thoughts on, or any kind of medium, lightweight, medium, so-called Ameritrash game. I don't like that moniker, but I'm using it to describe what I'm looking for. The other thing I picked up that I didn't mention in the other video, and I haven't gotten to the table yet, is the long-awaited expansion to A Touch of Evil. The Coast was a game that I wanted, or an expansion that I had wanted for quite some time, and Flying Frog is just not really focusing on that. They're all about Shadows of Brimstone, but they finally did issue that, and I immediately got it. And of course, I haven't played it yet, but I'm excited to finally have gotten that piece of this game. I really love A Touch of Evil. That is one of my favorite games in a theme that is not highly developed, I think, in the genre. There aren't a lot of games out there like that. And then on the RPG side, I also feel like I want to do something. I want to move a little bit more outside of just fantasy stuff so much. I mean, I'm not abandoning fantasy, by the way. Let me just say that, but I'm just feeling the need for something different. I've had this Lasers and Six-Siders printed out for quite some time now. It's a 1d6 based OSR space adventure, and it's based in, there's something called Swords and Six-Siders, which I played off camera. I don't actually think I ended up doing a video on it. This is well, as it says, it's a sci-fi OSR. Light rules. It is kind of a little campy. You can see here in the intro to it the call-outs to Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, and Ken St. Andre. If it says here, if you can imagine something in a space opera, movie, or comic book, then it fits into the universe of Lasers and Six-Siders. And I do plan on doing something with this in some way. What's cool about this, I like this little note here, operatic games. The rules on which this game is based originated in Swords and Six-Siders, which tends to be gritty in its handling of combat and rolling of the dice. I think that's why maybe I ended up not doing my video, because it wasn't really that enjoyable. I kept dying, and I felt like the attributes I had weren't enough to really do anything. Anyway, for a more cinematic tone, use the operatic options provided in some of the rules here, so it makes it a little bit less deadly, and I think that is a successful change. So I'll probably end up doing something with this, and then I also printed out to go with this. I thought somehow I was going to incorporate this. These are the rules to something called Space Explorer, which is copyright 1982, a game of exploration and encounter in deep space. And I think I had some concept here that I would use some of the encounters, things to give me some story or flavor. I can't really remember where I was going with this in my mind, but I have it here. I had also been thinking I was going to use some of the rules from the random tables from, I think, Starfall, I think it was, but I ended up selling that game before I got a chance to play it or even use it as supplementary material. So I my repertoire of science fiction background materials, random tables, is much more limited than that in the fantasy genre. So I am going to need, it's going to take me a bit more time, and maybe I can solicit some information from people listening here as to what I would really be interested in is, we can look here just off to the side. These are from a Terraforming Mars game that I moved off the table to do this video as I'm talking. What I'm looking for recommendations for this part is, for anyone watching on the RPG side, is any, like, I know Traveler, of course, but any actual older titles, older sci-fi titles that might provide resources for me akin to some of the things that I have shown on the channel for the fantasy, where I do have a lot of stuff and I have my own history in that type of gaming. I'm not so much looking for recommendations to things that people post right now, like on Drive Through RPG with random tables that they've made. I mean, I'm sure some of that is good material, and if there's anything in particular, I would love to hear about it. But I do like to try to find the actual older stuff, and so that's what I'm looking for. If anyone has recommendations along those lines for me to do some sci-fi stuff. The other thing I'm interested in doing on the RPG side is more of in the, I guess it would be like urban horror genre or occult or those types of things. And there's a lot of that I have bypassed, obviously, on the channel, so you can look to see more of that. Again, totally not abandoning fantasy. You're going to see more fantasy dungeon crawls, things of that nature. I have some ideas about some tutorial-ish videos on dungeon crawling and things of that nature as well, but I definitely want to do some more demos with different kinds of themes than I've done in the past. One of my kids came home with this hilarious unicorn, and it's hilarious because, first of all, it's a little chubby and wobbly, and I don't think of unicorns as chubby and wobbly. And second of all, I just love unicorns, as many of you who've watched my videos have seen. Possibly in the background on my desk, I've got this photo from a now defunct newspaper that showed a deer with a genetic mutation, and in Italy, and I just love unicorns. So based on that, I decided I wanted to make a little game around this fellow, and also utilizing some other minis that I have. These are the type of minis I have in my house for the most part. And to do that, I turned to these rules, these Dragon Rampant Fantasy Wargaming rules, and I bought them from the game store, and they are published by the same publisher that did the Frostgrave rules, which is, I saw them in the display there, and somebody mentioned them on my channel, and I went back and bought them. And this is the entire rule set. It's a light rule set. I'm going to go over a little bit how I've created my war bands. These are going to be my 2 war bands. This will be the unicorn as the leader of this war band, and this cat here is going to be the leader of this war band. And I will be playing this out on a terrain that is to be shown in a moment. The notion of doing skirmish rules solo is, in a way, an anathema to me, because, as I've said in so many other videos and contexts, I don't like playing both sides of something, and that is in essence what you have to do. Yet somehow with the mini rules and the light mini rule set, it doesn't bother me so much because I think the strategies and the tactics that you're using are so basic that it almost seems obvious what the other side is going to do, at least as far as I'm going to play it out. What I am going to do, however, is I'm going to take this stack of cards that I have and create some basic, a basic deck that will be the AI deck that I will pull, and have some, each card have a sort of hierarchy of options for what the other side is going to do. And I think that I'm going to make the options be, I'm just sort of making some notes here, that they're going to be randomized, but either going for the leader, going for the highest shoot value, or maybe going for somebody closest to the objective point or the treasure. I haven't quite worked out what the scenario is going to be. There are some scenarios in here. Of course, this is obviously for two-player, but there are some basic scenarios in here. So we'll go through this, and I'll show you how I created the war bands and who is going to be who, and then we'll take a few turns and see how it plays out. On the RPG side of things that are not fantasy, I've had Mutant Crawl Classics for a while, and it's a beautiful production. It's a gorgeous book. I enjoy looking through it, everything about it, the art and the world that is created. The only thing that is tough for me about it, frankly, are the rules, or the mechanics, I should say, because it's very, I guess you'd call it maybe crunchy, or you've got, first of all, as they say, the weird dice, the D30s and such, which the D14, I can't quite get my mind around using this in a solo session, even though the material just seems so rich. And I got this adventure, this number one level 0 adventure for it, thinking that I really don't know. I was thinking that I could sort of hack this up and play through it utilizing what is here, but every time I try to do this, I get stymied, and it's really by the mechanics, like a D30 roll. I mean, it explains how to do that, but it kind of seems like a lot to me to manage. That said, I'm still pretty compelled by it, and I like the idea, like when I approached this one, looking through it, I noticed the artifact check here stuck out with me, because in the concept of this world, there are artifacts lying around that people that may find, but they may not be able to use, and I thought that somehow that could be a way into this system, a way of creating a little story, like you have somebody traveling around trying to find an artifact, and can he use it? And I don't know. I'm just sort of putting this out there to get a sense of, first of all, has anyone listening to this, has anybody played this either with a group or solo, as we look here at the end papers? I mean, it's a really well-produced book. Has anybody played it in any fashion? And if so, especially if you played it solo, what do you think about it, and how did it go for you? Because, as I said, I've had this for quite some time, and I've never gotten very far with it, and certainly it hasn't made its way onto the channel even remotely, except for now, as I kind of show you things that are on my mind for 2021. It's been, as I said, it's been around. I've had this for a while, so this isn't nothing new. I've got the character sheets here, and it's just, I just get a little overwhelmed, to be honest with you. I get a little overwhelmed. Coincidentally, a viewer made a suggestion to me on a different video recently of a random table book that does have to do with randomized mutants, I think. It's not from this system, but I was thinking, like, maybe that, and I'll put the title of it up. I can't remember it right now off the top of my head what it was, but I got it already, and it has just a ton of random tables. Maybe something there, I don't know, or maybe just using this, importing this into a much simpler system could be the way to go. So that's another thought that I'm having about the channel and what I might do in 2021.
On the kind of, I guess you'd call it maybe ephemera side of things, I want to discuss a little bit about some books that came out in the 80s and early 90s that talked about D&D and role-playing games, this being one of them. What is Dungeons & Dragons? This is by John Butterfield, not the war game designer John Butterfield, a different John Butterfield, Philip Parker, and David Honigman. This is, let's see, the date on this is 82, and as you can see, it's just meant to explain what D&D is, and I'm not gonna go through in such detail, play out your wildest fantasies, battle with monsters, giants, and fiends. Here is the book that can lead you through this gateway to adventure, written by 3 British schoolboys who are pros at the game. It offers new keys to role-playing and advice and tips on good play that can give you more fun, more skill, and excitement unlimited. I want to look at this book and a couple of others that I have that came out within, say, 10-ish years of D&D becoming a thing and spreading out to the wider world. I've shown, I think, some of these on the channel briefly because I think it's interesting and an insight into the world of Dungeons and Dragons, how it was written about at the time, and included in that will probably be, as I've indicated I might do, a discussion of what Gary Gygax himself had to say about D&D. So I'm thinking about doing some combination of video on that, and if anyone has suggestions for books that I might take a look at that would fit into this video, this kind of video, please do let me know. And back to the category of things on the channel that will not be, I'm not going to see. This is kind of a little all over the place, I realize. I got Chronicles of Frost this year, and I had been looking for it for a while. I was pretty excited to get it. It's in the Mistfall world. It's a very different kind of game than Mistfall, and I knew that. I knew that going in. I thought that it would offer a little bit of what Mistfall offered, but without the heavy lift, really, of those rules. And there is a world that you can travel through, and there are monsters that you can fight and quests that you can fulfill. And, you know, I'll admit, I only played it a couple of times. It sort of fell flat for me. It was very dry, I guess, in a way that Mistfall was not. You get skills, and I can't actually honestly really remember the details of how it played. It was a while ago that I had it out, and I thought I would, there aren't very many videos on it, I noticed, and I thought that I would do it for the channel, but I don't think that's going to be happening here unless somebody can convince me in the comments that it's worth another look. As I said, I think I played it a couple times. You have quests. There are some quests that have to do with exploration and kind of going to a certain spot, and I don't know, I mean, this is one of the cards. This is your magic missile, and if it looks dry to you, I mean, that's just how it played for me, really kind of dry and mechanical. So that was a bit of a bust for me in terms of a game purchase that I made that I thought would be something great for the channel and fitting in with my real enjoyment of Mistfall, which I played for the channel a couple years ago and quite enjoyed, but not to be. Pretty much for as long as I have had this game, and there's 2 massive maps that I tried to show in when I did the unboxing. I'm not going to really be able to show them to you here, and this is kind of upside down there's Florida up there. Pretty much for as long as I've had this game, my concept for it, obviously it's not a solo game. I have had a concept in mind for it, and we look at some of the chits here. This is the original dice tray. I mean, we're getting very typical design. I think they are double-sided, and I believe they're meant to be with a question mark there, sort of uncertain what the full capabilities of it is. Here's my concept, and you can tell me what you think of this and whether or not I should pursue it for a video. What we're looking at here is a Victory Point game. It's a States of Siege game, Legions of Darkness. It's actually the very first game I ever did a video on for my channel, and that's how Geek Gamers started, was doing a Legions of Darkness review. It was me and one of my kids, and I have long thought, as you know, if you're familiar with States of Siege games, you've got basically a tower defense here, and you've got the armies coming in. In this case, it's I can't even remember what's in here, the orcs, and you have the dragons coming in, you've got, maybe there's zombies. There aren't zombies. I really can't remember and don't have the rules out. But the point being, I have long thought that one could take, and you've got day and night in this game, so there's some variability here in what's coming through. I have long thought, where I'm going, that you could somehow use these cards to randomize, assign for your Invasion America, turn that into basically a States of Siege mechanic. I mean, it is in essence that's an invasion that you're trying to protect the North American continent from, and well, actually, I think it's North and South American continent in both the maps, and then assign these cards to the invaders, and then as you turn over the cards, somehow randomize the invasion. I'm not sure whether you could actually go even further and use these events and encounters and modifiers somehow in that game, but I had that this is this has been a plan of mine for a long time. If there's anyone else out there who happens to own both Legions of Darkness, I suppose it could work for any States of Siege game, but Legions of Darkness and Invasion America, there's the idea. You can run with it. I don't know that honestly it's something that I would end up doing on the channel, but this has been this has just been something that I've been thinking about and wanting to do, and wondering whether it would be an enjoyable thing. Partially what's prohibited me, frankly, is the size of the maps that put together. They are just impossibly large, and even just using one of the maps, it is pretty daunting. And then, of course, one would have to figure out exactly how you would use the rules. I mean, there's supply rules, and it's an SPI game. There's naval movement and all sorts of things. So I don't know whether it's a struggle sometimes to try to simplify something down. And when I do these mishmashes, one of the challenges is to know what detail to keep, what detail to drop, and this is true with the RPG mashups that I do as well. I find that that's a little more straightforward for me because I feel more comfortable with narrative rule sets than I do with a wargame rule set. But knowing what detail to pick up and knowing what to drop to still end up with something that is interesting, that is a challenge to me. So this is Invasion America. It's a very unusual game to start with, and I thought that it just seemed like that a States of Siege kind of thing could be ported onto it for some type of, solo play, some type of AI situation, but I haven't done it. I mean, every year the channel continues. I think, oh, well, maybe I'll do it next year. So I'm sort of putting it out here as like, well, maybe I'll do it in 2021. I don't know. Maybe I won't. But there you have my thoughts on Invasion America as a possible States of Siege game, or at least managed by a States of Siege AI in the form of these cards from Legions of Darkness. And again, sticking with SPI as a publisher, we're taking a look here at Commando. This is a game from 1979. It was a game that it was a historical game. It had kind of generic rules for, as it says, tense, gritty battles fought by commandos to win acclaim. Players take the part of firearms or commandos or individual commandos, and you can set up a variety of different scenarios. What's interesting about this is that I do not believe that it came with any chits or anything. Now, I could be wrong about that. Somebody can correct me. I'm sure if they know, I do not, but I feel like it was just the rules. But what's interesting about it, and you can see as I page through, there's hand-to-hand combat, panic rules, exchanging weapons, there's rifle grenades, very traditional, detailed SPI kinds of rules. What I've got here, though, that was part of this, we've got underwater climbing, various scenarios on how you can pick up in various different, like you could do the raid on Entebbe, for example, or the various different raids from across historical time periods, and you can see them played out here and what the various setups would be, and you can see this is why you wouldn't necessarily have chits with it. There are designer notes here that talk about what commandos do, and here are the design credits, in fact, for this portion of the game that you can see. What was interesting to me about it, however, is that there's also an article here about what commandos were like, theories of commando operations, and how that all actually played out in real life. However, what's been interesting to me here, as we page through the charts and tables, is the second part of the rule set here, which is indeed a role-playing game. And this is from 1979, and I think it is the first sort of contemporary, I guess you'd call it, role-playing games, sort of set in a contemporary time. Very basic in terms of what the skills are and the character attributes: strength, marksmanship, dexterity, endurance, leadership. There's hero ratings, which, if you're familiar with some of the other games of this time or slightly later, like the James Bond 007 RPG comes to mind, might make sense to you. And I've been sort of interested in this and maybe using some of these rules, these somewhat basic rules, to combine this with perhaps something like my copy of Tactics 2, which I also did another I also did an unboxing of many years ago on the channel, and put onto some of the character chits, or the chits and the roles in that game, some of the role-playing aspects of this game. I don't know whether it would work. I don't know how interesting it would be, so it's partially why I haven't done it yet, but this is another thing that's been on my mind. And we can see here the notes on the expansion. The notes on the expansion are kind of interesting because it talks about two different types of role-playing games. There's a closed system role-playing game and an open-ended one. An open-ended one requires a games master to invent a world, construct adventures for the characters, and provide new rules. A closed system says may not even require a game master, and then they give an example of that on Guard, a closed system role-playing game provides a set of rules that are closer to the rules of standard historical games in spirit. They cover every eventuality that may arise in the course of play. Typical from that time period, thinking that more and more rules could account for basically every action that somebody could take. But again, I've been feeling like I want to take some of these older rule sets and try to pair them in some way with some of the older games. And this is a possibility for 2021 to see. It's a little bit low down on the list of things that could happen, but it could happen. And absent that, I wanted to present to you, at least in the spirit of this video, the thought that I was having, and see if I could get any responses back from people who maybe are familiar with Commando or not. I'm not. I have these rules, and that's basically it. And we're looking here at what it's called the character record of the characters here, and again, fairly basic skills, but allowing for some variability and development during the course of play. As I close out this video, I just want to talk a little bit about the channel and where it's been and where it's going. It's been now approaching 5 years of the channel, really 4.5 years of the channel, and the viewership of the channel, I think, is impossible to know exactly how people fall. As I've talked about before recently in videos, people interested in board games, people interested in RPGs, and a lot of people, I think, interested in both. And I really appreciate the dialogue and communication I've had with everybody about both of those aspects of the channel, and also the indulgence, I guess, that I feel that viewers give me in terms of some of the game design types of videos or RPG design types of videos that I post, which may be a little esoteric in nature sometimes. I want to thank all the viewers for that and let you know that content along these lines is going to continue to be produced, and that I really am very open to hearing suggestions from viewers, either via comments on the channel, which I try to respond to as best I possibly can, or by contacting the channel through email. I can't necessarily respond to everything, but I try as best as possible. I hope to continue the channel's growth and to continue the variety of offerings that I have been able to do over the years, and do want to let you know that it's been, while 2020 has been a really challenging year, and while at the very beginning of the pandemic I thought I was going to be almost unable to continue to do videos until who knew when, it has been great to be able to actually do that and to regroup after a period of weeks in March and come back with a bunch of videos this year that have been very sustaining for me to produce, and I hope sustaining for you to view. As always, thanks for watching.